My Economics Brains Trust is joining me now, the Australian's economics editor, Adam Creighton, and founder of the investment newsletter, The Switzer Report, Peter Switzer, via Skype. Gentlemen, thank you very much for the show. I want to start with you, Peter, because there's quite a lot of talk around today. We could see a 30% drop in the housing market, the residential property sales. How real is that, and how concerned should we be?
I think that would be the worst case scenario, Peter. I think if the suppression period, the phase we're in now, ends up stretching out to 6 months, and we've got more concerns about death rates and all those sorts of things, then I think the entire housing market could get really spooked. But if we start seeing the sort of transition that they're talking about in Europe, and for example, Austria and Denmark, they're starting to open up small shops and bigger shops at the end of the month. If we get that kind of transitional move towards normalcy over the next 3 months, I reckon a 30% fall in house prices is absolutely the worst case scenario.
Adam, I want to go back to the JobKeeper announcement or package that's passed, at least the lower house of Parliament today. You've written about it a lot in the last couple of weeks. We're both on the same page in terms of this artificial distinction in turnover thresholds between large business and small business. I look to the worker. If the same worker is employed by different businesses in terms of earning the same amount, it's not fair, I don't think, that there are different rules. In the end, it's the worker we should be focused on, not the scale and size of the business. Do you think the government might change their mind here?
Well, look, probably not, because I think the reason that they've set that very high threshold, that very demanding threshold of a 50% downturn for large businesses is obviously to save money. But you're quite right. The same type of worker employed by a large business, which is endured, say, a 30 or 40% fall in their revenue, well, that worker's going to be laid off. I mean, the idea that a very large firm with a turnover of more than $1 billion is going to keep on all of its staff, if it's endured a 40% fall in revenue, I think is fairly fanciful. And I think the other problem with the package is, of course, the fact that it's a flat rate. And so you're going to have 1 million people or so who will be enjoying, 100 and 200% pay rises from the package. So if you're earning $500 a fortnight at the moment, maybe as a casual university student, suddenly you'll be earning $1,500 and actually not having to do any work. So that's
but it's also exacerbated. It's also exacerbated by the example of, say, a couple both earning modest incomes. Let's say they're on the average sort of wages of around $80,000. She works for a big company. She loses her job or she gets stood down. They're not in JobKeeper. She gets nothing. He's still, battling along. Maybe a police constable still working. She goes in to then say, well, OK, let me have the dole like everybody else. No, you can't have it because your husband earns over $79,800. Now, they've lost half of their household income. They get nothing, but the casual in the shared house next door, some of them will earn an extra $1,000 a fortnight on the taxpayer largesse. It doesn't seem fair.
No, look, that's exactly right. And just to dwell on that point further, of course, the part-time and casual hospitality workers who will benefit largely, they can be re-employed fairly easily at the end of this period. But if we're seeing breadwinners with skills in full-time jobs laid off, just like you allude to, it's much harder for them to join the labour force later in the year.
Peter, I want to talk to you about superannuation, Peter Switzer. You're the expert on superannuation. There was obviously this announcement by the government you could access your super. Some of the big funds, though, are still making clear they've got the ability to block or delay withdrawals, despite the government saying you've got the right to access a certain percentage of your money.
Yeah. And it's the kind of thing that people are very surprised about. And of course, the super funds never expected to be in this sort of situation where a lot of Australians will be trying to get that $20,000 out of their super fund. And a lot of the very good super funds have what we call illiquid assets. It's very hard for them to get their money. Now, today they're all saying, yes, we can do it, yes, we can do it. But the bottom line is we never ever thought that super funds would be putting obstacles in the ways of people actually getting their money out. And I think the super funds have been really caught out.
And Adam, it doesn't look like the government's taken up, I think, your very clever suggestion of letting people take their super money in their wages now.
Yeah, look, that is really unfortunate. I suppose it's early days still, but yes, it looks like the superannuation lobby is just too strong. I mean, I think it's extraordinary that at a time when the government is, basically going to borrow more than $200 billion, that it doesn't at least look at suspending the compulsory super contribution, because that would give it an extra $20 billion a year in revenue, roughly, which it sorely needs right now. I don't think this is money that does need to be going into the funds management sector. And just on the super policy, I mean, I think so far, if you look, there's about 400,000 people have applied to access their super. That, assuming that they all want the $20,000 maximum, that's only 15% roughly of what the government was forecasting would be withdrawn. So I really do think that the super funds are kind of well positioned at the moment to be able to handle these withdrawals. And actually, I'd be very surprised if the maximum of $27 billion is actually reached in terms of withdrawals, because I think, of course, people will quite naturally try to rely on the various government supports as much as possible before actually using their own money.
We'll see how it's a long way to play out yet, but the sooner the country gets back to work, hey, Peter Switzer, the better. Got to leave it there. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Adam Creighton, Peter Switzer, thanks for your time.